I'm not just saying this, I'm betting on this. Inequality is still getting worse at a rapid rate, and we need to do something if we want to stop that from happening. Keir Starmer and Donald Trump are not going to fix it, so whose fucking job is it?
Gary Stevenson, the youngest trader at one of the world's biggest banks, a financial prodigy who cracked the system, cashed in big, making millions by predicting economic collapse. At that point, though, he walked away, and you're about to hear why.
We live in a society and a culture that very often tells young men, you are what you make. How can you then be surprised when you see the growth of Andrew Tate and the growth of Donald Trump? These people are fucking angry because we fucking lied to them. Two things. If people understood, one, the rich are getting much, much, much richer, and that's the cause of their growing poverty. And two, if this is left untreated, it will grow and get worse.
What can we do right now to change the game for people?
The message I want to give you and give your audience is...
Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
What are the key things that we can expect to happen over the next 12 months or so that will directly impact the amount of money in our pockets?
I don't think you can expect things to get any better. Interest rates will start to come down. How quickly, we're not sure. Could be 0.5%, could be 1 full percent in the next year. That's great if you need to refinance your mortgage. But I think the big thing that will cause is we'll start to see house prices go up. They're already going a bit. I've been saying since the beginning of COVID, this is going to cause a massive crisis in house prices rising. People might be surprised to hear me call that a crisis. But if you're sitting there owning your own home, house prices going up might seem great, but for people my age and younger looking to buy their first property, it already costs £500,000 in London. If that becomes 700, 800, I think it's worth thinking about what that does to the younger generation.
So what data do you look at to work out what's going to happen?
So I worked professionally as a trader for a long time. I look at the markets pretty much all the time. I look at the markets every day, and I use them to try and understand what's going to happen. But I also talk to traders, people I used to work with. And really, as a trader, you don't make money so much by understanding what's going to happen. You make money when the popular perception of what's going to happen is wrong, because that's when the prices are wrong, basically. So I'm always looking for popular misconceptions. And I think there was a really big popular misconception that happened during COVID, which was that everyone is worse off in COVID because the economy is shut down. I'll ask you a question. Do you know how much money the UK government has given out since the beginning of COVID? And what I mean, to be clear, is the total UK government deficit since the beginning of COVID.
No idea. It'd be a total guess. Go on.
It's £1 trillion at this point, which is 1,000 billion pounds. So adult population of the country is about...
Where's that money gone?
Well, this is the question, right? The adult population of the country is about 50 million. So we're talking about £20,000 per adult. Enormous amount of money. And your question is exactly the right question, right? If the government gives out £20,000 per adult, somebody somewhere accumulates £20,000 per adult. So for anybody watching, anybody listening, if you are not £20,000 cash better off now than you were before COVID, someone's got your £20,000. And my history as a trader, as an economist, was kind of understanding that distribution matters, that inequality matters. So when I see government giving out this huge amount of money, which we knew was going to happen at the beginning of COVID, we knew this in beginning of 2020, who's going to get that money? It's so much money. Who's going to get that money? And my analysis was that it's going to end up with richer people. Because what COVID is essentially, what a lockdown is you're basically banning rich people from spending money. So I come from quite a poor family, an ordinary family. My parents' expenditure didn't really fall during COVID because their expenditure is, 95% mortgage, food, bills. And that's most people. Most of their expenditure is rent, mortgage, food, bills. You still have to pay that during COVID. The people whose expenditure collapsed during COVID was rich people because they can't go on holiday, because they can't go to restaurants, because they can't go to the theatre, because they can't go to fancy bars, they can't hold parties. These are the guys whose expenditure collapsed. So what you saw during COVID was the expenditure of the rich collapsed. That means if you work in the service industry, you've lost your wage. And what happened was then the government essentially prints the money and replaces that money, which used to come from the rich. So now the government prints money, goes to working people, they use it to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage, to pay their bills. But where does that money go? To the owners of the houses, the owners of the mortgages, the owners of the corporations. It goes to the rich who can't spend it.
So the economy is only a disaster for people with no money.
Yeah, that is the point that I try to make all the time. That is the plan. That's why I do the work that I do. You look at the wealth of the richest. I think the average US billionaire doubled their wealth in the first 1 year of COVID. The first year of COVID was easily the best year ever in terms of total wealth for the richest people all over the world. And once you understand what happened, which is the government poured this enormous amount of money in to basically replace what used to be the spending of the rich, then you realise it's obvious. This is obviously what's going to happen. And I think what is worth doing is, if you accept this has happened, and we can discuss whether it's happened or not, if you accept that we paused the economy for 3 years and in that time massively increased inequality, what do you think would happen to living standards when you unpause after you do that? I think if I were to say to you, come here 10 years ago and say, what do you think would happen if we paused the economy, massively increased inequality, and then unpaused it? Well, the obvious consequence is, well, the rich will be much richer and their living standards will improve, and everyone else's living standards will decrease. And that's exactly what happened. And what I do, the work that I'm doing, the work I do on my YouTube, the story I'm telling in my book, is really all about trying to explain to ordinary people, if you don't watch inequality and you let it get bigger and bigger and bigger, that is not immaterial to you. That is why your kids won't be able to get a house. That is why your kids will live in poverty. And I say poverty, I don't say that lightly. What has happened in the last 5 years in this country, and it's happened in a lot of other countries as well, this is a real significant material increase in poverty. And not just for the bottom 10%, not just for the bottom 20%. Half the country now struggle to simultaneously turn the heating on and feed their kids in the winter. And that's new. And the message I want to give you, give your audience is, that's not going to get better, because inequality is still getting worse at a rapid rate. And we need to do something if we want to stop that from happening.
This episode is brought to you by Payhawk, a company we think are great partners for high growth and scaling companies. Have you been in a world of wasting countless hours on expense reports or playing spend approval ping pong? Well, those days are long gone, thanks to Payhawk. No more receipt chasing or drowning finance teams in paperwork. You can now focus on what truly matters, which is growing your business. And what is Payhawk's brilliance? Well, they help companies create what they call a healthy spend culture, so their customers don't stress about how much they can spend, where or when, because it's all pre-agreed. Talk about a weight off their shoulders. So if you're curious to see Payhawk's magic in action, their company cards app and spend management platform could revolutionise your business. Visit the link in the description to book a demo, and don't forget to mention you heard about them on the High Performance Podcast. And of course, huge thanks to Payhawk for supporting our show. Here's to smarter spending and time back in all our pockets.
There's a brilliant speech that you quote in your book by a colleague. There's the Scouser Bill that hasn't gone to university.
Yeah.
And he's sort of like risen up the ranks in the city.
Yeah.
And you tell the story. I'll let you tell it better than I do when you bring in your textbooks.
Yeah. Yeah, so I lost a lot of money. It's the only time I ever really did lose a lot of money, in early half of 2010. And I was so young, 23 I was. And I did what sort of any economic student would do, right? I studied economics at London School of Economics. I started bringing in my textbooks and reading in, like, how did that happen? How did I lose money? And I was really lucky as a trader that I worked with this guy. In the book, it's called Billy. Scouser, working class background, didn't go to university, worked his way up from being a cashier at Halifax. And he just sort of like watched me, like, one day, like staying in late, reading these books. Next day, watching me again. Third day, just slaps these books out of my hand straight into the bin at my feet. What the fuck are you doing? How old are fucking you? Do you think you're fucking still at university? Look around you. Look around you. Does this look like a fucking library, mate? This is not a place to read books. If you want to understand what is happening, look with your fucking eyes at the economy. Go home. Speak to your mum about her financial situation. Look at the advertisements on the tube. Walk down the high street, look at what shops are closing down, what shops are opening up. Is there more homeless people? Is there less homeless people? Talk to your friends, talk to your friends' mums. Understand what is happening. If you want to understand the economy, you have to look at it. And that I describe it in my book as the most important thing anyone ever said to me, basically. And I think this is a big part of the problem that we've got. I come from a working class background, and then I studied at LSE. And then I worked in the city, and then I studied at Oxford, and now I exist in the media, and I try to lobby politicians. And in the world of economics, you will hardly ever meet a single person whose family financial background is at least not pretty comfortable.
Yep.
And these guys don't fucking understand. It's all fucking numbers to them. It's all fucking. And then, you know, I remember. So after I quit trading, I went to do a 2-year master at Oxford. And I don't know if you've spent much time at Oxford. Yeah? Everyone has their own like designated castle. That's your castle over there. That's where you live. Fucking Harry Potter shit. And I was having like my mid-year review. This is true. We have to, for your mid-year review, you have to wear a cape and a bow tie. So it's really, so you go into this like your designated castle, this like wood-panelled room with your cape and your bow tie, with these like 3 econ professors who are also wearing capes and bow ties, by the way, but their capes are red. And they were like, you know, what do you think of the course? And I'm not one to mince my words, you know. I said, I don't think the course is very good. Those weren't my exact words. And then, what do you mean, what's wrong? Obviously, they're Oxford, they think they're the best. And I was like, well, you're not talking about anything. Why don't you talk about the housing crisis? You know, why don't you talk about why kids can't get good jobs? Why don't you talk about how people are getting poorer? Why don't you talk about things that happen in the economy? And these guys, they sort of looked at each other. And then they go, what do you mean? The economy's getting better. And you couldn't help but hear these like 2 missing words bouncing off of the wood-panelled walls, right? The economy's getting better for us. You know, this is the problem. And I thought, like, increasingly, we live in such a divided society where basically everyone in the conversation about economics is from a rich background.
Let's talk then about what we can do, right? The first thing that we've understood from this conversation is we can get together. We can rise up. We can make our voice heard. But what about today? You know, you've already given a great example of the fact that you need street smarts, not book smarts to get on. So if you're 15 and about to leave school in the next year or two, what should you be doing? If you're a parent like the both of us with young kids, what should we be saying to them? What can we do right now to change the game for people?
This is such a difficult question for me because I know, I could turn around and tell you like, you know, reduce your spending, you know, don't buy into all that consumerist bullshit, you know, keep your spending limited. And of course, you know, kids, if they want to achieve financial security, of course they should be working hard at school. And they should be, if what you really care about is financial security, you should try and go into like fields like mathematics and economics and computer science, these kind of well-paid fields. You should try to go to a good university. You should try to get a good job. But truth is, I was a fucking smart student. I had very good grades. I got into London School of Economics, which is a very prestigious university. And I had a few friends who got into places like Oxford or Cambridge, right? Almost none of the kids from poor backgrounds, even of the ones who went to LSE, got the best paid jobs. And I was one of the top students at LSE. I got first. I had guaranteed first after 2 years. I didn't even need to do anything in my third. That's how good my grades were, right? And the way that I got a job, this is a story in the book, is by cheating in a fucking card game. Because the way the jobs were given out was based on your CV and cover letter before you've got your fucking grades. Your CV, what's your CV when you're 19? You know, I was working in DFS in Beckton fluffing pillows. These guys from rich backgrounds, they'd been playing the clarinet at the Royal Albert Hall and they'd founded a charity that drove dirt bikes through the Sahara Desert. They were president of the Junior United Nations, right? So the truth is, I could tell you, work fucking hard, get to the best university, get the good job. The truth is, if you come from a poor background, even if you study hard, go to the best university, you probably won't get the best jobs. And I'm sorry to say that. So what I want to say, that doesn't mean you don't study hard. And that doesn't mean you don't work hard. But what I want to say is, listen, I've been there. I come from a very poor background and I've been in basically the best job you could get, right? This system is designed such that almost nobody is able to jump upwards. You have to work hard just to hold on, just to buy a house. Work hard, do your best, but understand this system is designed for you to lose. And the reason I say that is because I've got friends, they work so fucking hard. And they come from poor backgrounds and then even though they work hard, really all they're able to achieve financially is keep the roof over their head, keep the lights on. You know what I mean? That is normal life now. And I went to a grammar school, and then in the grammar school there's a lot of sort of middle class kids and some working class kids, right? These working class kids, they look at the middle class kids we went to school with that have nice big houses and they think, what the fuck am I doing wrong? Well, I'll tell you what you're doing wrong is, that middle class kid, when he went to buy a house, his mum gave him 500 grand. That is how middle class people buy houses, right? So what I want to say is, yes, work hard, save, don't waste your money, don't spend frivolously. Understand the system is rigged because as it is, The message we send young kids, if we focus too much on you need to work harder, you need to do it, the message that sends is your outcomes are your fault if they're bad. For me, I think the first steps and where we have a chance is, I think most people still do not understand or accept or believe that the reason they're getting poorer and poorer is because of growing inequality and the growing wealth of the rich and especially the super rich. I think most people haven't made that connection.
I think they know they're getting poorer because of inequality. I don't think they have yet realised the super rich are getting richer because of the inequality.
Yeah, they don't connect these things. What you've seen in the last sort of 5 years, this massive increase in government debt, this massive increase in poverty, coupled with this enormous increase in wealth of the super rich. And people don't really connect them. And you can't blame them because things like I've mentioned here, like the fact that stock markets are all-time highs, there's been massive increase in wealth of the rich. That doesn't really get reported that much in the newspapers. And also your average person doesn't know any of the super rich, right? So you don't see their wealth exploding. There's a lack of visibility on it. But I think two things. If people understood one, the rich are getting much richer and that's the cause of their growing poverty. And two, if this is left untreated, it will grow and get worse. They would demand change. So really, you only really need the public to understand those two things. And that is why I go back to, that is why Elon Musk and Donald Trump are spending so much money to point their finger at foreigners, because the foreigners stand between you and understanding that. You know, so I think we've been here before. I talk about Charles Dickens a lot, big fan of Charles Dickens. 150 years ago, your average British person lived in abject poverty. That is the truth. We've been here, and not just your average British person, your average Spanish person, your average American, your average French, Italian, German, you know, your average Japanese person, you know. And we got out of it. And we got out of it because people got together after World War II and said, listen, we've just spent the last 6 years devoting our entire economy to fucking killing each other. And in that time, we were still able to provide people in our countries with education, healthcare, housing, food. Well, we're not fucking letting go of that. We demand education, housing, healthcare, food. And what did they do? They raised the top rate of income tax to 95%. They raised inheritance tax to 90%. And what happens? Suddenly, fucking lo and behold, ordinary people get good quality housing and good quality education and good quality healthcare. And people like my dad can work for the post office and support a family. You know, we've done it before. So it's not impossible, but it requires working together. And listen, last time it took 2 fucking world wars, and I don't want that to happen again.
Now, what I enjoy about your work, Gary, is like the depth of your thinking. So as you use COVID as the example, for most of us, we were responding to the immediate events, and yet you were thinking of second and third order consequences. So when you think about the 12 months that we're about to experience, would you share with us how you think, say, for example, Donald Trump coming into power is going to have an impact on ordinary people's lives?
Yeah, it's so hard to answer that question because what Donald Trump says has not a huge amount of relationship to what Donald Trump does. And so I think when I saw Donald Trump, it reminded me so much of a lot of the people I used to work with when I was a trader at Citibank, especially some of the senior management. So there was a period that towards the end of my book when I was trying to quit, and all of the senior management at Citibank were trying to keep me. And for about 2 weeks, I would have like 3 or 4 meetings every day. And those meetings would be with like different like formations of senior management. You know, maybe it'd be a 1-on-1 and then it'd be like 4-on-1 and then it'd be like these 3 guys. And every meeting, there'd be like a different strategy. And sometimes you'd have good cop, bad cop. So I'd be in there, me with 2 guys like you, and one guy would be shouting in my face, you know, Alex Ferguson, hairdryer treatment for like an hour. And then you go straight into the next meeting and it would be 6 guys, senior management. And they'd all be saying, we believe in you, we support you, we're going to give you everything you need. And there'd be the same guy there in that meeting who was shouting at my face in the last meeting. And what I realised when I saw this is really powerful people, not all, but a lot of them, they don't care about the truth. They go into a meeting or they go into, in Donald Trump's case, a press conference or, you know, on social media. When they say a thing, it's not because they believe a thing. They go into these situations, they want to get something. What do I need to say to get the thing that I want? The line I use in my book is, there's no dishonest moves in chess. Like you play in a game, you know, you're playing Monopoly. If you lie to your mate in Monopoly, is that a lie? You know what I mean? People like to win games. Well, these guys, life is a game for them. Life is a game for them. And then, so Donald Trump, in my opinion, what I see is somebody whose rhetoric is calculated to drive deeper the divisions which we're seeing in society. I mean, you see he's supporting reform, he's supporting Tommy Robinson, he's supporting Nigel Farage. And it's not just in the UK, he's supporting anti-immigrant political parties across the whole world. Why is he doing that? In my opinion, the reason he's doing that is, if he's smart, and I think we're reaching a point now, I think for a long time in the last sort of 20 years, in my opinion, the economy's been getting worse for 20 years now. But for the first 10, 15 of those years, people believed it's going to turn around. It's becoming increasingly clear it's not going to turn around and things are going to just keep getting worse. So if you're somebody like Donald Trump, like Elon Musk, you're thinking, well, we need to tell the public a story here, because if things keep getting worse, and worse and worse, the pitchforks come out, right? It's happened in history, right? And there's people like me saying tax the rich. People like Elon Musk and Donald Trump are rich. They obviously don't want me to win. They need to sell an alternative story. And what is the alternative story? What is the most popular alternative story? It's not us. It's not the billionaires. It's the migrants. It's the foreigners. So what they need, hatred of migrants and hatred of foreigners is so good for Elon Musk and Donald Trump, because it's the migrants and the foreigners that stand between Donald Trump and Elon Musk and higher taxes. Because people want something different. And there's a quote from he's dead now, American economist Milton Friedman. At times of crisis, the change will be chosen from the ideas lying around at the time. The two biggest ideas lying around at the time are, by far the biggest is the problem is foreigners. And the second biggest, it's me and my lot saying tax the rich. So if you're Elon Musk and you're Donald Trump, you are going to put a lot of money behind the guys saying hate the foreigners, because if they don't win, we win. And if we win, those guys pay higher taxes and they don't want to pay higher taxes.
And is tax the rich the answer?
I think it has to be. I should be clear when I say that, right? Because I know when I say that, there'll be people out there that are earning 60, 70, 80, 100 grand a year. They're like, oh my God, this guy's going to come tax me. And I think people have been trained when they hear tax the rich to think about income tax, all right? Listen, I come from a poor background. I made a lot of money. I made millions of pounds working in the city. it was 50% top income tax when I was working. At the same time as I did that, Duke of Westminster inherits £10 billion, pays nothing. Right, this is not, when I say tax the rich, this is not about you, your uncle who's a doctor who's earning 70 grand a year, your son who's just got a job in the city. This is about mega rich families who have hundreds of millions, billions of pounds, and they don't work for it. They get it because their dads had it. Listen, if you don't tax these guys, they are gonna buy the houses your kids need. I always use Rishi Sunak as an example, right? So Rishi Sunak, he didn't exist on the Times Rich list. He becomes Prime Minister, suddenly he pops up 700 million quid. I don't know where he was before that. What I want people to realise is, if you're Rishi Sunak and you have 700 million quid, what's your passive income on that? If these guys make 5% conservative, they probably make more. 5% of 700 million is 35 million quid. So this guy's making £500,000 a week.
For doing nothing.
Yeah, that's the passive income. That's just for what he owns. And bear in mind, his father-in-law is much, 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 much richer than he is, all right? That money's going to come down. These guys, Rishi Sunak and Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they can only live in 5 or 6 houses. They can own 1,000. These guys are competing for the ownership of the houses and the resources that your kids need. And if you allow them to get richer and richer and richer and richer, they will take a bigger and bigger and bigger share, and your kids will end up with nothing. And this is why we're seeing young people can't afford to own property. And that will be the future. Ordinary people, you go back, read your Dickens. Back 150 years ago, ordinary working people could not afford property. Yeah. That is the truth in a lot of the poor places in the world. You go to a lot of places in China, a lot of places in Sub-Saharan Africa. If you think housing in London is unaffordable, go to Mumbai, go to Shanghai, go to Hong Kong, go to Johannesburg, and see what ordinary people get for an ordinary wage over there. Things can get a lot worse. And any place you go that is horrendously unequal, good quality housing is unaffordable because you're competing with the rich for that.
Do you think it could get that bad in Western society?
I think it will get that bad. I think the only thing that stops it, what I will say is, there's no economic fail-safe. Because as the rich get richer, they own more, you own less. That means you spend more time renting. When you get a mortgage, you get a bigger mortgage, you pay more interest. The more assets that they have and the less assets that you have, the more you have to pay them to do things like live in a house, to get energy, to eat food, right? So that the cash flows, it's accelerating, right? Because as they get richer, you're paying more interest, which means they get even richer. And what we're seeing now is ordinary families. My parents' generation, my dad worked for the post office for 35 years, right? He never earned even the average income, owned his own property, got a pension, relatively secure retirement. My generation, they don't have that. So what you see there is families lost their homes. Ordinary families lost their homes. Generationally, they lost their homes. But if they couldn't protect their homes when they owned their own home, well, they definitely can't protect when they don't own their own home. So it will get worse. Economically, it will get worse. But what is not certain and where we have some hope and where we basically have some power and we have to exercise it is the politics.
So 2025 is well underway, and I bet a lot of you, like me, have already started to make plans on how this can be the very best year yet. And for me, making it a great year revolves around some investment, but actually investing in myself physically and mentally. So the physical investment has been a sauna that I've just had installed at home, and already I'm absolutely loving it. But the mental investment is making sure that I take time to go travelling with my kids, Flo and Seb and Harriet, my wife, on those kind of memory-making holidays that last a lifetime. But obviously both of those goals centre around needing finance. The good news is, though, that's where our new partner XTB comes in. They're dedicated to empowering you on your investment journey, and that's regardless of whether your horizon is short or long term. You can maybe buy stocks and ETFs commission free. You can invest passively with investment plans, open an ISA account, earn up to 4.75% interest on uninvested funds, and loads more. And the good news is it's so easy using their app. So just download the XTB app today or click the link in the description below to start making your money work for you in 2025.
I lived in a very small terraced house backing onto a railway in Ilford. I shared the room with my brother. There's a video on my YouTube called Ilford where I'm from. Ilford, hometown glory.
For a job?
My dad worked for post office 35 years. My mum worked for social services for about 5 or 6 years. I don't want what I see from my friends who work so hard, and all they are able to get out of it is a roof over their heads. And because we send this message out like success is all about what you put in. When in reality, success in today's society, and we're a bit older than the kids today, success in today's society for the younger generations is 90% dad. I'm sorry to say that, but it is. And of course, there's a 10% which you put in, but it's 90% dad.
So there is a risk from my perspective then that survivorship bias plays a big part, and actually plays a big part on a lot of the guests that come on our show who sit in the chair that you're in, who also come from difficult backgrounds but have been really successful. And I think we have to recognise that survivorship bias is a real thing.
I remember once they did some psychological study of like what is the number one personality, most overrepresented personality trait amongst billionaires. And they found that the most overrepresented personality trait amongst billionaires is risk-taking. And they're like, okay, well, if you want to be a billionaire, take risks. Well, I'll tell you what, that's going to be a fucking high personality trait amongst homeless people. You know what I mean? Of course, it's impossible to become a billionaire without taking risks, of course, right? But you only become a billionaire if the risk pays off. What if the risk doesn't pay off? It's absurd, you know what I mean? Of course,
So how do you feel when you see all these hustle culture Instagram accounts, hustle culture podcasts, work harder than everyone else, take bigger risks than everybody else?
I feel fucking sad. Because I know what that does to the mental health of young men. To tell them, listen, we live in a society and a culture that very often tells young men, you are what you make. That is your value. If you don't make money, you are worthless. And if you don't make money, it's because you didn't hustle hard enough. You need to work harder. We send that message to young men in a society which makes it increasingly extremely difficult, bordering on impossible to make money. What is it going to do to the mental health of young men to simultaneously tell them you're worthless if you don't make money, the amount of money that you make is based on how hard you work, and make it impossible for them to make money? And then how can you then be surprised when you see the growth of Andrew Tate and the growth of Donald Trump? These people are fucking angry because we fucking lied to them. Tell them the truth. Tell them the truth, which is, listen, we, your elder generation, fucked it and gave you almost no chance, and you need to work super, super fucking hard just to pay the kids. And if you do that, if you work hard and you feed your kids and you put a roof over their heads, be fucking proud because we made it hard for you. Tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. And then they should be proud of themselves. They should be proud of themselves because it's hard nowadays to have a family. It's hard nowadays to have a family. And me personally, people ask me like why I don't have a Rolex and why I don't have a fancy car. I don't want to be waving these shiny baubles in front of young men who will never be able to afford them. Because I was that young man once and I know how it feels like. And listen, I've got nothing against people who work hard and make money. I've got nothing against people who work hard and make money. I did it myself you do it for your family. Don't lie to the kids. Don't lie to the kids. Because I've seen it. I've been to LSE. I went onto the city, right? You know where Canary Wharf is, right? It's in Poplar, right? I went on there, I worked on the trading floor. I'm from Ilford, East London. Someone asked me, where's your fucking accent? That's an interesting accent. Where are you from? He said, there's nobody there from East London. There's nobody there from East London. What? So listen, if you're telling kids that success is about hard work and intelligence, then you're telling me every single person in East London is stupid and lazy. Where the fuck are they? I've been there. I grew up with them. They're fucking smart kids. They're smart, and there's smart kids everywhere. The story that we've told ourselves about what makes a society great and what makes a society wealthy have changed over time. We had this big shift in the 80s towards individualism. We had Thatcher, there's no such thing as society. And I want to make it clear, I'm not against individualism. I'm not against, one person going out, I'm going to make money, I'm going to get rich for me and my family. I'm not against that. But if you look at history, take the big sweep of history, this last 70, 80 years that we've lived through since World War II, it's not normal. It's not normal. It's not normal for ordinary people like my dad and I presume your parents as well to work regular jobs and be able to live in a nice house and take their families on holidays and to have retirements. This is not normal. Most of history is a tiny super wealthy elite and a bunch of impoverished peasants, right? To protect your middle class, you need to stop the rich from growing and growing and growing their wealth because eventually they eat your wealth. It's these things are connected, but at the moment, the story we have about what is a rich economy, what is a wealthy economy is about individualism, is about entrepreneurism, it is about every man for himself. And I think there are good sides to this, but the fact is, the only power the poor and the ordinary working people have ever had to protect themselves from the rich is power in numbers. And when you make ordinary people extremely individualistic, they lose that. Listen, I've got a YouTube channel that says very clearly, listen, your kids and your grandkids are going to live in really bad poverty. And the only way to stop that is to fight together to tax the rich more. I've been doing that for years. And the number one most common comment I get on the YouTube channel by a million miles, do you want to guess what it is?
How do I make more money?
How do I make more money?
Is it? Right.
It is. How do I make? And I think there's something, the most powerful thing the rich can do to protect themselves from the massive ordinary people and to keep the massive ordinary people poor is to make people selfish. I honestly think there's nothing more powerful you can do.
To sell you the
that.
dream that you can be like them if you don't stick
Because
together.
if the poor, listen, you ever watch any of those Bruce Lee kung fu movies? What does he do? He goes into a room, fights 100 guys one at a fucking time, right? They come in one at a fucking time. Listen, these guys are fucking rich, right? If we fight one-on-one, they'll take everything. If your kids go out there and try and outbid Rishi Sunak's £500,000 a week passive income kids on a house, his kids get the house. The only power the poor have ever had to protect themselves from the rich is power in numbers. And if the poor are selfish, trying to fight one at a time, running at Bruce Lee one at a fucking time, then they'll get taken out one at a time. They need to work together. And we as a country, but not just us, Americans and Europeans, need to remember how hard our grandparents fought to get rid of that poverty that our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents lived in. And they recognise you have to fight together. And it's hard. It's hard in this individualistic society. And the job I do is hard. But I think people still have it in them. People want to work together. But we have to rediscover that, I think.
And it is an individualistic society. So everyone's out for themselves.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very hard thing to change. And I think if you turned around tomorrow and said 90% tax, 90% inheritance tax, everyone
would blow
with
up.
The amount of money to leave the country would leave the country. And then you would end up in a country with no super wealth.
Yeah, well, I want to be clear. I don't think a 95% income tax is probably the right choice, especially
even if you made it 60, I think a lot of people, I think actually even now with the changes Labour have made, a lot of people are looking at Dubai, looking at the south of France, Monaco.
Yeah.
And therefore, a huge amount of tax leaves the country.
What I make it clear is, I actually am not looking to, and I'm not campaigning for raising taxes on income. For me, it's about raising taxes on wealth. And I think this is sometimes hard for people to understand, because for an ordinary person, your income is what matters. You know, your work income is what matters. Most people are not sitting on 10, 20 million, 100 million, £1 billion of wealth, right? These rich families are sitting on enormous amounts of wealth, right? So say we turn around to, and I want to make it clear what this wealth is. This is assets.
Yeah.
This is property. This is buildings. This is mortgages. This is your mortgage. This is government debt, right? So say I was a banker, I was quite a good banker, I was quite successful, I made quite a lot of money. You turn around to me and you say, okay, we're going to charge you 9% tax. I can go to Dubai, I can go to Singapore. Say I'm a wealthy person with £100 million worth of British assets, British mortgages, British debt, British properties. Then you say we're going to tax you on the assets you own. Well, I can leave the country. The properties are still fucking here. It's your mortgage. Yeah, so if we talk about passive income, who pays that passive income? You pay that passive income. You pay that passive income when you pay your rent, when you pay your mortgage, when you go to the supermarket. You know, this is the profits of the corporations and rents and interest. And when you pay your taxes, a lot of that is paying government debt interest, right? If I own £100 million of British mortgages and I move to the Cayman Islands, where's my money coming from?
The UK.
British people paying their mortgage. And we can choose to tax it. Listen, I guarantee you, the government of China would not allow me to own £100 million of Chinese assets, live in the Cayman Islands and pay no tax. They wouldn't. Why does the British government allow it? Why does the British government, whose recent Prime Minister was worth £700 million and whose father-in-law was one of the richest men in the world, allow rich people to not pay tax just by pretending to live in Dubai?
Go on, tell us.
Because the politicians are super rich.
Yeah.
Okay, and not all politicians are super rich, and I don't want to contribute to this idea that all politicians are evil, because ultimately, if we want to change things, we are going to have to find ways to work with politicians. But listen, you know what?
Obviously, you're talking there about Rishi Sunak. He's history. We now have Sir Keir Starmer in. Who does come from a working class background.
Yeah.
He sat in the chair that you're in right now. He listens to High Performance.
Okay.
If he was to listen to this episode, what would you want him to hear?
I want Keir Starmer to understand, if he does not deal with rapidly growing wealth inequality, there is no way he can prevent living standards from falling. I want him to recognise that. And, you know, I've been on TV, I've gone on Politics Live and all this stuff, and I've told these guys that's what's going to happen. And they say no. And I say, remember today. Because unfortunately, and I wish it wasn't true, I don't think Keir Starmer's Labour government is going to do anything to stop wealth inequality from growing. And that means that living standards will fall. And he might not believe that, but, you know, write in your calendars, come back in 2-3 years' time and see what's happened. Because listen, I'm not just saying this, I'm fucking betting on this. And I'm bet a lot of money. And I've been betting on this for 14 years now, and I've got a pretty fucking good track record on this. This is going to happen. You know, I could walk into any bank in the city and get paid £2 million a year betting on this, because I'm fucking good at this. Because I have a good fucking track record, okay? Inequality will grow if you don't stop it, and living standards will fall. You cannot, I think it's so unbelievably naive to think you can allow this tiny minority to take all of the wealth that used to be owned by our parents, our grandparents, our governments, and not expect the rest of society to be impoverished.
Can I ask you then about what you just said there about you, like you're betting on inequality rising? Because in your book, it seems like there's a period where you discover your moral compass. When you're working in the bank in the city, and you seem to then realise that your moral compass isn't pointing in the right direction. So how do you sort of square away the fact that you're betting against these outcomes?
I'm not going to stop betting against it, because that's my power. That's why people listen to me. But, I'll talk a little bit about, I worked as a trader from 2008 to 2014. And it was sort of about, that was a period, I started working just before the 2008 crisis. And when the crisis hit, everybody thought, similarly to COVID actually, everybody thought it's going to be like a couple of bad years and then this like roaring comeback, because we've cut interest rates to zero, we've done all this quantitative easing, we've done all these measures to fix it. And 2009 didn't happen. Okay, next year will be great. 2010 didn't happen. Okay, next year will be great. 2011, I'm sitting on the trading floor with a bunch of rich guys. Again, everything's going to be great. And that's when I start realizing, you know, you're looking at your friends and your family who are just doing worse and worse. And you start realizing these two things are splitting apart and it's not going to work. And I started realizing, actually, things are going to be great for these guys here, but the real economy is just going to get worse and worse. And I started betting on it. So 2011, I started to bet really aggressively the economy would basically get worse forever. And this is the story in the book. And at the end of that year, 2011, I was Citibank's most profitable trader in the world on the basis of this unbelievably pessimistic bet. And it's such a crazy thing to experience because on the one hand, like that was my job and that was my training. You know, I studied economics at the London School of Economics. And I was like, you know, killing it, got paid a load of money. You're like the guy on the trading floor. And what you made your money on was betting on disaster, basically.
But there's a story, though, again, in your book that I think does capture something of the risk-taking for somebody that had nothing. And it's the one that stood out for me was when you turn up at LSE and Colonel Gaddafi's sons in your class and some Chinese politicians' kids are there. And so you're amongst like the real wealthy elite. And you choose to go and sit in that lecture room on the front row, right, front and centre. Yeah. And ask the questions and make sure that you get what you want out of it. And that to me is a real act of courage that any of us could do. Yeah, you know, I didn't. I talked to my old LSE classmates. So I lived at home for uni, right? I couldn't really afford to live out. And I went in, as you said, LSE like, has a massive like 1,000 seat lecture theatre. And I just went in every day in my Echo tracksuit, front seat, and I just asked the lecturers questions. And it didn't even really occur to me that I was making a big statement. If you talk to my like friends now at LSE, they were like, oh, we thought you were mad. We thought, who the fuck is this kid going to sit at the front? But I was expelled from school in sixth form. And also, like, not in sixth form, in year 11, just for my GCSEs. And the thing, I didn't have a desk in my house, right? So when I was at, like, A-levels, like, you have to get it in the class. You know, there's nowhere really for you to study at home. You get it in the class. Obviously, I wrote the book and I go back and I read the book sometimes. And it does, what occurs to me is that when I was a kid, I was a little bit mad. I didn't really realise it. Like, I was so... What do you mean by that? I'm a bit mad.
I was obsessed with winning. Obsessed with winning. I was convinced that I was the smartest kid. And I was kind of aware that the game was a little bit rigged against me. And I was like, I don't fucking care. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it. And I was mad. But you know, also, I was fucking good at maths and shit like that. Like I won like a few math competitions when I was a kid, right? Yeah. I didn't have a desk at home. You know what I mean? And I never did a single piece of homework. I'd turn up at a math competition and win. So hard work and this kind of insanity plays into it. I wrote my book and I didn't really realise I was doing it at the time, but there's a number of points in the book where I do things that are a bit crazy. You know, you mentioned going to the front of these lectures, but then also to win this trading game, I stopped going to lectures for like 3 weeks, just obsessed about playing this one game. And then there's one really crazy story. So I got hired, this is in the book as well, I got hired by this like sort of big senior trader. And after like 9 months, he quit. He retires to go live the dream. And new boss comes over one day and everyone's gone home. And because I was a desk junior and I'm just like doing some admin stuff. New boss comes over to the desk and he's this absolutely like giant, like 6'6" Canadian guy. And he's just like, hey, how's it going? And he hadn't been announced as the new boss yet. And he just like introduced himself. Yeah, I'm Gary. And then he goes to me, so what do you do on the desk then? And I was like, this guy's like a new boss, right? So he's a big guy. Surely he knows what my job is. And because the old boss had gone, I was like part-time covering his job, which was he was a Swiss franc trader, which is like quite a junior, like quite senior role. The old boss had it. And there was a moment where I looked at him. He asked me, what's your job? And I kind of like tried to like balance him out. I was like, is he like shitting me? Is he like bluffing me? And I just thought I'm the Swiss franc trader. Just I thought, because it was kind of true, right? Because I was covering it, but I mean, it wasn't. And then he kind of looked at me and Swiss franc. And you could tell he was kind of thinking, this guy looks about 18. I was like, oh, yeah, Swiss franc trader. All right, I'll see you later. And then that was it. That's how I became the Swiss franc trader. It's like you take these mad chances. And then also like putting my first massive trade on, which turned out to pay. I didn't, but you know what? None of these things were things I realised I was doing at the time. For me, the book, in a sense, is a story about obsession. And I think it covers, in a sense, I like to think, both the positive and the negative sides of obsession, which are, me, I'm the kind of guy, I fucking love games. I love games. If you drop like a really good game in front of me, I'll wake up and it's 6 months later. I won't realise what's happened. Like, I'm in it. I'm just in the game. And that's, when I was working as a trader when I was young, I was like that. I was in it. I was obsessed. But then the flip side of that is, like, you can lose yourself. You know what I mean? You can lose yourself in the game. And, you know, the second half of the book is about depression, because, you know, my obsession with trading led me to realise that the global economy was going to collapse. And, like, there's no, like, bell you can go and ring. You know, you can't pick up the phone to fucking David Cameron, mate, global economy's going to collapse. You know what I mean? And then what do you do when you realise that?
How did it feel being the person that has seen the global economy is going to collapse, fully believing that you're right and seeing that no one else around you has spotted this?
I tell you what, it doesn't make good dinner party conversation. You're up there and you're kind of thinking, you're getting paid £2 million a year to bet on this, right? And first year you bet on it, you make £2 million. You think, probably I'm right. But you don't want to believe you're right. You kind of, you have this cognitive dissonance where to be a good trader, you have to back yourself.
Yeah.
So you back yourself, you're right. But also, you don't want to believe the global economy is going to collapse, right? So you kind of split it. And you tell yourself stories. There's one good scene in the book where I talk to another junior trader, Australian kid from a very rich background. And I say to him, do you think we should do something? And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, about global economy collapsing. He's like, well, we already put the trade on. And I'm like, yeah, I don't mean the fucking trade. I mean, like, do you think we should do something? And he's like, do you think we should do more? And I'm not talking about the fucking trade. Do you think we should do something? And he doesn't even understand. And then eventually the penny drops for him and he realised, like, I'm talking about, should we try and stop it? And he just pisses himself laughing. He's like, mate, you can't fucking stop it. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to become fucking president. You know, you can't, you know, and it's true. Because, you know, I've been out here fucking 10 years now I haven't stopped it fucking yet. I'm doing my best here. You tell yourself stories like, well, it's not my job. It's not my, and I think mate, I tell you this right now, I'm not the only fucking person telling myself that story. You know, increasingly, more and more of us see it's fucking collapsing. And so many people in this country and across the world tell themselves, but it's not my job. It's not my job. That's Keir Starmer's job. Yeah. That's Donald Trump's job. Well, I tell you this now, Keir Starmer and Donald Trump are not going to fix it, so whose fucking job is it?
Can we talk about the mental health challenges? I think the two things that I'm getting from this conversation is a passion for what you talk about and where you've been, but also a deep obsession as well. So what is the cost of thinking and acting in the way that you do?
I pushed everyone away from me. I had a really great girlfriend who was really worried about me, and I was pushing her away. And I moved to Japan partly to get away from my girlfriend in a way, because I just didn't want people to be close to me. I just wanted to cut everyone away. I wanted to cut everybody loose. And I moved to Japan, and then I had nothing, didn't have my friends around me. I hated the job, I hated the guys at work. I tried to quit, and they basically threatened me, you know, you can't quit. For me, my depression was, you don't give a fuck. You just don't care. You don't care about whether you don't care about it. First, your eating goes, your sleeping goes. You're sleeping all hours. You're eating like, I was in Japan, I didn't know anything. I couldn't fucking read anything. You know, I dropped down to about 8.5 stone. Yeah, which is not a lot. I'm a small guy now, but now I'm probably about 10.5. You know, I was fucking skinny. The mad thing was I was still exercising like mad. There's one, like I was running 5K on the treadmill. I was trying to get my 5K down to 18 minutes. Just smashing it. If I look back, it was kind of like almost quite masochistic, like you're trying to hurt yourself. And then I quit the bank in this insane way. Like I didn't have a plan. I just walked into the office like I'm quitting. And they're like, what the fuck? They're blowing up. And they had all these meetings. I spoke about these meetings I had. I would walk into this meeting and it'd be a 1 hour long meeting, 2 hour long. I wouldn't say a word. Just stare at the floor. It was a really just like I wasn't talking to no one, letting go of anything, letting go of everything in a way. But I think for me, in a way, I don't want to undermine depression. I think I needed to go through that depression to let go of the things that weren't important and fun, and reconnect with myself in a way, because I was so obsessed with these abstract things like games and the economy and trading. And then suddenly, like, thankfully, I was able to get sick leave, and like a really nice Japanese doctor. The bank tried to make it hard for me. A really nice Japanese doctor wrote me sick leave. And then at the end of the day, I was in Tokyo, and it's such a mad place. And then I threw myself into, I'm going to learn Japanese. I'm going to learn Japanese. I'm going to study every day Japanese. And then most people in Japan don't speak English. But so as you learn Japanese, the country kind of starts to, it's a difficult country to get into, but it starts to open itself up to you a little bit. And I started to try to like care about things like food, you know what I mean? And things like music. And I started to draw. I was trying to draw a picture of the Beatles. So it was kind of like, and I started to go to this English language conversation cafe and just like talk to people. Just like it was like kind of like a second, I think that depression, it was horrible. And I think when you look back at a thing like depression, I think we often it's easy to romanticize and forget how actually tough it was. But I think I needed that to just reconnect with like important things like my body. Like I was really physically sick. I had this really bad heartburn all the time. And the doctors kept giving me pills for it. And it wasn't until I sort of cut away from the job and relaxed that heartburn stopped. And I just tried to build things up from the ground. And, you know, I'm not like a psychologist or anything, but anyone who is suffering from depression, I know it's fucking hard. I think that basic structure, eating, sleeping, exercise, talking to people, you got to base it on that. And that's what I tried to do. And even now, you know, it's funny, people sometimes ask me, like, because the book talks a lot about depression and my mental health, people sometimes assume like, oh, well, you're cured now. But the truth is, like, I still have difficult times. And whenever I do, it's food, sleep, exercise, talking to people, you know.
And what are the warning signs for you now when you can sense that you might be going into a dark period like that?
Not wanting to talk to people is a big thing for me. The thing which I really have to do is to force I'm very instinctively like, bam, putting the walls up. It's me. It's Gary versus the world, pushing people away. If I don't want to talk to anyone, then I know things about it. I mean, if the sleep's going and the food's going, you know, if you're not sleeping, you know, then you know that's like a big obvious sign. If you're not sleeping, if you're, you know, for me it tended to be losing weight, but it might be you're compulsively eating and putting on weight. But I know it now. But the thing, it's a tough one because that kind of anxiety is part of what drives my work. But I think, you know, I've been doing therapy on and off for a long time, and I know when it's too tense, and I take time off. You know, I had the YouTube down for 4 months just now, and I go traveling. Getting back to Japan helps because I think I didn't really realise till I lived in Japan how like London I was, how much London had got into my skin. Like, this is a city. It's competitive and it's about money and it's people and it's expensive, you know. And Japan has its own problems, but the culture is a bit different in that. And I cycled all the way across Japan this year in the summer. So I try and get out. I try and get time away, but you know, it's still a thing. It's still a thing that I battle with to some degree, and it probably always will.
I bet. We're about to move on to our quickfire questions to wrap up.
Okay.
Before we get to those, though, for people that have listened to this amazing conversation, what would you like them to do as soon as they finish listening to this episode?
I mean, I would love them to go and watch my YouTube videos, understand what's happening. You know, watch the most popular videos on the channel, but also the first video really explains. It's called How the Rich Got Rich from COVID-19. Think about and try and understand this idea that maybe the reason we are getting poorer generationally is because of growing inequality. You don't have to believe it, but consider it. Watch some videos. And if you are convinced, tell your friends, tell your family. You know, I rely a lot on word of mouth. If everybody convinces one person, we get everyone. I'm just one guy, but if enough people get behind this, we can make change. So listen, educate yourselves, speak to your friends and family. And if you don't believe it, just keep talking to people around you, because I don't think we will win this as individuals. We need to work together. So be there for your friends, be there for your family, check out my stuff, consider that inequality might be the problem. And if you do believe that, support it and share it.
Very good. Right, ready for some quick fire questions?
Yes, let's go.
The 3 non-negotiable behaviours we need when it comes to looking after our finances.
Ooh, sensible. You need to be sensible. Don't buy all that consumerist nonsense. I think community is important. You need to speak to people. You know, you're not going to win this by yourself. And be calm. Don't try and get these 100%, 200%. If someone's offering you 100% a year return, they're probably frauds, to stay away from it.
What's the single best piece of financial advice you've ever received?
Look at the world. Look at the world with your eyes. As I said in the book, your eyes and your ears and the people you speak to are your best way of understanding what's happening. But I will probably add to that, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. That's very important to understand.
What is the one habit financially that you would love people to adopt?
Financially. One habit financially. I mean, obviously, it's good to save regularly if you can, but I know a lot of people can't do it. One good financial habit. This is a tricky one, actually. Because I don't want to tell people not to enjoy themselves. I would say, don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up. It's a hard world that you live in. Do your best. Take care of your family. But don't beat yourself up, because if you get involved in that negative mental spiral of it's my fault, that can lead to a bad place, and I've seen it happen.
Brilliant.
What's the single biggest financial mistake that we can all avoid?
That shooting for the moon nonsense. You know, listen, it's very, very, very difficult to get rich, but it's possible to provide stability for your family. Don't jeopardize the stability of your family for the dream of getting rich.
And finally, Gary, what's your final message to our audience for living a high-performance financial life?
Listen, you have to work hard. You have to be sensible. Try and stay away from all of this nonsense. Honestly, for me, it's more and more about taking care of the mental health of yourself and the people around you. Because the easiest way to let yourself collapse financially, and I think almost all big financial fuck-ups are rooted in mental health collapses. Speak to your friends and your family. Don't go mental. Shoot for stability. Build over time. Slow and steady wins the race. But take care of yourself and the people around you.
Brilliant. Gary, good luck on the mission.
Thank you.
Struggling to find the motivation? Try this instead.
Take it professionally, not personally.
Why are we postponing love and community and friendship?
I'm not worried if anyone fails, as long as we are changing things for the good.
To have those kinds of friendships, I think, are absolutely essential to being what we would call a high-performance human being.
Take back control over your happiness. Give the High Performance app a try. Then see how you feel.